Daf Yomi, tractate Zevachim, page 106b. We are, let's see here, we are on, like my yad, 106b, we're on the words Bikan ve'elach. It's about one line in. Okay, Bikan ve'elach. Bikan ve'elach, Zevachim shekadishon, mishas heter rabamos, yikriv mishas is rabamos. From that point onward, the verse is speaking about sacrificial animals that one consecrated during a period when there was permission to sacrifice offerings in private altars, meaning before the tabernacle was erected, and then he sacrificed them outside the tabernacle during a period when the prohibition against sacrificing on private altars was in effect. Okay? שנאמר למען אשר הביאו בני ישראל לזבחיהם אשר הם זובחים זבחים שהתרתי לך כבר על פני השדה לא מנחה זובח בשעת ייסור ובמזמר עליו חשוף כאילו הקריב על פני השדה. This is apparent, as it is stated, in order that the children of Israel shall bring their sacrifices which they slaughter upon the open field, and they shall bring them to the Lord, to the entrance of the tent of meeting, Leviticus 17:5. The phrase "their sacrifices which they slaughter" is interpreted as referring to offerings that I have previously permitted for you to slaughter on private altars. This verse teaches that those offerings may now be sacrificed only inside the tabernacle. The phrase "upon the open field" tells you that in the case of one who slaughters an offering on a private altar during a period when the prohibition against sacrificing on private altars is in effect, even if he sacrifices the offering to God, the verse ascribes him blame as if he sacrificed it upon the open field in idolatrous worship. Veheviim Lashem. The verse continues that they shall bring them to the Lord. This is a positive mitzvah to sacrifice in the tabernacle, even offerings that were consecrated before the tabernacle was erected. From where is it derived that there is a prohibition against sacrificing them outside the tabernacle? The verse states, "And they shall not slaughter any more their offerings to the Seirim after whom they go astray. This shall be to them an eternal statute throughout their generations." Leviticus 17:7. Yachol Yehoshua kares Tamid lamar chukas elam tieh zos lahem lo yoisam zos lahem lo yaches lahem. One might have thought that sacrificing these offerings outside the tabernacle would be punishable by karet, as is the halachah with regard to offerings consecrated after the tabernacle was erected. Therefore, the verse states, "This shall be to them an eternal statute throughout their generations." Leviticus 17:7. One can infer from this verse that this, the punishment for transgressing a positive mitzvah and a prohibition, applies to them. But no other punishment applies to them. It is clear from this braita that the verse, "and they shall not slaughter any more," is used to teach about the prohibition against sacrificing outside the tabernacle those offerings that were consecrated while there was permission to sacrifice on private altars, and not those offerings that were consecrated while it was prohibited to sacrifice on private altars. Ela Amar Rabbi Avin, Kal v'chol me'al, Uma bimkom shelo anash, Hizir makom shenash notin shizil. Rabbi Avin said the prohibition against slaughtering an offering outside the temple is derived through an a fortiori inference, which means a kal v'chomer. Just as in the case in which the Torah did not prescribe punishment for certain action, it nevertheless prohibited it, as is the case with regard to sacrificing outside the temple and offering consecrated while there was permission to sacrifice on private altars. So too, in a case in which the Torah did prescribe punishment for certain action, as is the case with regard to slaughtering outside the temple and offering consecrated while it was prohibited to sacrifice on private altars, is it not logical? The Torah prohibited the action. Ravina says to Ravashi, if so, that whenever the Torah states a punishment for a certain action, there is no need for it to state the prohibition. Then let the Torah not state a prohibition with regard to eating forbidden fat of a kosher animal, and then derive the fact that it is prohibited through an a fortiori inference from the prohibition against eating an unslaughtered animal carcass. Just as with regard to a carcass, even though the Torah did not prescribe punishment for consuming it, it nevertheless prohibited consuming it. So too, with regard to animal fat, for which the Torah did prescribe punishment, is it not logical that the Torah prohibited its consumption? Rav Ashi came before Rava and said to him, the prohibition against eating animal fat can also not be derived from the prohibition of a carcass, as the a fortiori inference can be refuted as follows. What is notable, meaning what is special, unique about a carcass? It is unique in that it renders other items ritually impure through contact with it, and forbidden fat does not share this stringency. The existence of unique stringency undermines the possibility of using an a fortiori inference. They have to be exactly even. Rav Ashi raises the possibility of deriving the prohibition against eating forbidden fat through a kal v'chomer inference from various other prohibitions in that, like forbidden fat do not carry the stringency of being punishable by karet, and Rava rejects each one. Can one derive the prohibition against eating forbidden fat from the prohibition against eating carcasses of ritually impure creeping animals? See Leviticus 11:41. One cannot. As what is notable about ritually impure creeping animals, they are notable in that they render others ritually impure through contact with any amount of them. Forbidden fat does not share this stringency. One can derive it from the prohibition against eating the carcasses of ritually pure creeping animals. Okay, creeping animals that are not one of the 8 shratzim. Okay, see Leviticus 11:41, which do not have the capacity to render other items ritually impure. One cannot, as what is notable about ritually pure creeping animals? They are notable in that, with regard to their prohibition, there is liability for consuming any amount of them. Forbidden fat does not share this stringency, as one is liable only if he eats an olive bowl of it. One can derive it from the prohibition against eating the fruit of a tree during the first 3 years after its planting, which is orla, or from the prohibition against eating diverse kinds in a vineyard, for which one is liable only if one eats an olive bulk of them, just like with regard to animal fat, one cannot. As what is notable about orla and diverse kinds in a vineyard, they are notable in that they are items from which deriving benefit is prohibited. Forbidden fat does not share this stringency. One can derive from the prohibition against eating sabbatical year produce, from which benefit is permitted, just like with regard to animal fat, one cannot. As what is notable about sabbatical year produce, it is notable in that it transfers its sanctity to the money with which it is purchased. Forbidden fat does not share this stringency. Mitruma, can one derive it from the prohibition of a non-priest partaking of the portion of the produce that is designated for the priest? Truma, one cannot. As in the case of Truma, there are no circumstances in which its general prohibition was permitted. The prohibition concerning Truma applies broadly, unlike in the case of forbidden fat, where the prohibition applies only to the fat of domesticated animals, but not to the fat of undomesticated animals. Rava notes that the possibility of deriving the prohibition against eating forbidden fat from all those prohibitions can also be refuted based on this claim, as in those cases too, there are no circumstances in which their general prohibition was permitted. Amar Rabbi, Amar Rabbi, Amar Rabbi, Amar Rabbi, Ikashali, Hakashali, Haditnam, Bezach Milam, say, Rabbi said, if there is a difficulty for me in accepting Rabbi Avin's claim that the prohibition against slaughtering any offering outside the temple can be derived via an a fortiori inference, this is difficult for me. That which we learned in the Mishnah, in Kritot 2a, which enumerates the 36 cases for which one is liable to receive karet. The end of that Mishnah lists one who neglects sacrificing the paschal offering, and one who does not undergo circumcision, which are positive mitzvot, unlike other cases enumerated in the Mishnah, which are all prohibitions. Teisi b'kav chayim mimoisu. Ma moisu shlo anash yizir pesach milash anash yenudin shehizir. Rav explains his difficulty. If Rabbi Avin is correct, derive that there is a prohibition against neglecting the sacrifice of the paschal offering and not undergoing circumcision via an a fortiori inference in the case of one who leaves over sacrificial meat beyond the allotted period for its consumption. See Leviticus 22:30. Just as in the case of one who leaves over sacrificial meat, where the Torah did not prescribe punishment but nevertheless prohibited this act, so too with regard to neglecting the sacrifice of the paschal offering and not undergoing circumcision for which the Torah did prescribe punishment, is it not logical that the Torah actually prohibited neglecting them as well? Amravashi, Amrita Lishmata Kamei Rav Kahana, V'yamar li v'motir l'asidi chal mifrach, ma lemotir shekein ein lo takana, tomar pesach yesh lo takana. Ravashi said, I stated this very discussion before Rav Kahana, and he said to me, one cannot derive a prohibition against neglecting the sacrifice of the paschal offering from the case of one who leaves over sacrificial meat via an a fortiori inference, as it can be refuted. What is notable about one who leaves over sacrificial meat? He is notable in that there is no remedy once the prohibition has been violated. Shall you say the same about the neglect of the paschal offering, for which there is a remedy? One who fails to bring it on the first Pesach must bring it on the second Pesach. The Gemara challenges the very premise of Rav Avin's claim. But can one derive that the Torah prohibits an action via an a fortiori inference? Even the one who says that the court administers punishment based on an a fortiori inference concedes that one does not derive a prohibition from an a fortiori inference. Therefore, Rabbi Avin's claim is refuted. Rather, the prohibition against slaughtering and offering outside the temple courtyard can be derived in accordance with the statement of Rabbi Yochanan, who says, it is derived from the prohibition against offering up outside the temple through a verbal analogy between the reference to bringing stated with regard to slaughtering outside the temple and the reference to bringing stated with regard to offering up outside the temple. With regard to slaughtering, it is stated, or that slaughters it outside the camp, and he did not bring it to the entrance of the tent of meeting, Leviticus 17:3-4. And with regard to offering it up, it is stated that offering up a burnt offering or sacrifice, he will not bring it to the entrance of the tent of meeting, Leviticus 17:8-9. The verbal analogy teaches that just as there with regard to offering up, the Torah did not prescribe punishment for an action unless it also explicitly prohibited the action, so too here, with regard to slaughtering, the Torah did not prescribe punishment unless it also prohibited it. Therefore, even though the Torah does not explicitly state the prohibition, it is evident that it is prohibited.